Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Go Ballistic, another action-packed weekend in the Scottish Premiership. Chief among which, Rangers dropping more points domestically, Celtic winning again, but is Brendan Rodgers truly happy? And we have Hearts at the top. Could this be the season? It's very early days, lots to talk about. Also the flip side of Celtic, Aberdeen, a sort of post-cup final come down if you like. Roger, we'll go straight to the action at Ibrox. Were Rangers actually lucky to get a point against Dundee?
Oh, I think if you get into the 92nd minute or whatever it was, Ryan, of course we're fortunate to get a point. It actually took me back to that Queen's Park Cup game last season when they were trailing, they got the penalty in stoppage time, James Tavernier stepped up, and you sort of half expected John McCracken to save it, just the way the day was going for Rangers. He didn't save it, Tavernier equalised, Cyril Dessers then had one chalked off right at the end, I think 97 minutes. But Rangers wouldn't have deserved it. They were poor again. And it's just this great enigma of Scottish football, how they can be so good in games against Celtic and games against European sides, and they come home and produce performances the way they did against Motherwell and Dundee.
Yep, you're going to speak to Kris Boyd about that shortly, so do stay tuned. Ibrox seemed to empty almost from the moment Nasser Jiga was sent off, and that was even before we heard the boos at full time for who was still there, and some boos during the game for certain players. How much of a worry is that, not just for Russell Martin, but actually Rangers at large, that already there's a bit of malcontent?
The form at Ibrox in 2025 has been lamentable. I mean, we touch upon the Queen's Park game there under Philippe Clement. You think of other poor home results, that dreadful historic run without an Ibrox win that Barry Ferguson endured for a long time. And now Russell Martin started with a 1-1 at home to a Dundee side who were knocked out of the Premier Sports Cup at the group stage, who lost to Alloa and Ayrshire.
A lot of people's favourites to go down.
Well, there you are, and lost their opening league game at home to Hibs, and they almost get 3 points at Ibrox. Now, those Rangers supporters are clearly fed up. They clearly want a better performance from the team, and they want a greater tempo. They want more intensity. You saw how Rangers performed in the last 15 minutes when they sort of threw caution to the wind, if you like. They rescued a point. They almost got all three. I think fans are quite right to ask, where was that for the first 75 minutes?
Yeah, it was, by all accounts, Cyril Dessers clearly offside, but it was actually a good move, and you say it took a while for them to get to that stage, and Russell Martin said that he was surprised at the booing of Kieran Dowell in particular. Now, you could say that he's not on social media, but do you think it's important that a manager is aware of these things?
Yeah, of course it is. And if he was surprised, he was the only man in the stadium who was surprised by it. That is a breakdown in the line of communication to Russell Martin. Now, if Russell Martin's made aware of it and still decides that he's going to go ahead with that, then fair enough. But he shouldn't have been surprised, because people should be educating Russell Martin on the landscape in which he's operating currently. He shouldn't be getting any surprises like that. He should know what things have been like at Ibrox. He should know what the supporters have been going through, and he should know what to expect from those supporters. Because I don't think it was a surprise. I actually thought Dowell did quite well when he came on. He probably contributed more in a short space than Mohamed Diomande had earlier in the game.
He was back in his more natural position as well, wasn't he?
But the Kieran Dowell thing is, it's going to be a difficult one now for the player to shed, because the Rangers supporters, I should say, seem to have made their mind up about the lad.
You mentioned surprises there for Russell Martin. Just before we go to Robert Grieve, who's over in Czechia ahead of the Viktoria Plzen game, will there be surprises at the weekend when Russell Martin names his team to face Alloa? How many changes? What kind of team are we going to see?
You're way ahead of me here. I tend to think Rangers will probably just need to see out Viktoria in Pilzen tomorrow night before they look at Alloa. One resultant performance will probably lead into another. Is Mikey Moore available for Saturday? Is Telo Asgard fit? Is Hamza Igaman fit? Are there any new signings in? They're obviously pushing hard to get Nobel Mendy from Real Betis in Spain. So Saturday at this time of year, when the transfer window is still open and games are coming thick and fast, on a Monday lunchtime, Saturday night seems a long time away. It'll seem a long way away to Russell Martin too.
Yep, I suppose those new signings who we haven't seen yet but are already confirmed in Asgard and Moore, this potentially could be the perfect time to unleash them, for want of a better word, then against Alloa, potentially. Do you see that as a possibility?
I'm sure this time last week we'd have been saying at home to Dundee on a Saturday night would be a good time to get people out, you know, in an easy game like that. And look how that ended up. So Rangers can't afford to take Alloa lightly. I think Alloa have won every game they've played this season under Andy Graham. They've been fantastic in the Premier Sports Cup, in League One. I can remember a day they knocked Rangers out the Challenge Cup 3-2 at the end of drill back in the day. So Rangers at the minute cannot afford to take any domestic opposition lightly. And
touching on that, Rangers did win 3-0 in the home leg against Viktoria Plzen, but could we see a miraculous comeback from the Czech side? Let's go over to Robert Grieve, who is over in Czechia just now.
Well, we can now head over to Pilzen. It looks a breezy morning, though the sun's shining. Robert Grieve, will the sun be shining in Rangers tomorrow night?
Yeah, I think you'd very much like to think so, Roger. They've put themselves into a commanding position after that first leg last week. I think Pilzen showed themselves up to be a fairly limited team, in all honesty. But yeah, you'd like to think Rangers should have enough to go through. Obviously, a very disappointing weekend for Russell Martin and the players after the 1-1 draw with Dundee at Ibrox. But yeah, the way Rangers have played in the European games so far, you would like to think they'll come over here this afternoon fairly positive and fairly confident that they can get the result that will see them through.
Seems a ridiculous question, but how can Pilsen away look an easier fixture than Dundee at home for Rangers at the minute? I mean, try and explain this to me, this enigma that is Rangers, excellent in Europe and still dreadful domestically.
I think it's quite simple, Roger. Pilsen won't sit in. You know, teams that sit in against Rangers frustrate Rangers, and I don't think they've got the quality at the minute, or certainly the confidence in what Russell Martin's asking the players to do to actually break through that. Pilsen will come out, clearly they're 3 goals behind Rangers. They have to come at Rangers to try and get themselves back into the tie, and that would suit Rangers the way they play. Dundee, albeit they didn't sit back for the 90 minutes, clearly they scored a goal. It's not as if it was a completely kind of backs against the wall performance from Dundee. It wasn't, but they sat in to a certain extent and made life really, really difficult for Russell Martin's team. And that was always going to be the issue. When Martin was appointed the Rangers manager, everyone could see he was a manager with a certain style and a certain philosophy in the way he wanted his teams to play. But it's always going to be difficult for that when teams come to Ibrox and they sit in and they make it hard for them to get broken down. But that won't happen tomorrow night. As I say, Pilsen are going to have to come out, and you've got to imagine that's going to suit Rangers. That's been the difference, Roger. You know as well as I do, in the European games when they've gone away from home, and it's been an end-to-end game. They've got the quality. They have got quality in the attacking areas to hurt teams. And as I say, hopefully from a Rangers point of view, they're able to do that tomorrow night. Obviously, they don't have to win the game, but you'd imagine, I think they're going to get opportunities to score because of the way the game should settle out.
You were at Ibrox on Saturday night. Have Dundee now just set the template? Stephen Presley set the template for Dundee United, St Mirren, Falkirk, other teams coming to Ibrox. You sit in, and Russell Martin's team might struggle to break you down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's quite breaking news. I mean, that was the story last season as well, Roger. You know that when teams came to Ibrox and made life difficult, and they weren't prepared to make it a kind of end-to-end game, then Rangers toiled. They don't have the attacking creativity right now because teams' problems and to carve teams open. That may change, that may develop. You'd imagine it will develop in the coming weeks. They've obviously brought some new players in. Oliver Antman last week in the European game looked excellent. Thought he was quite flat at the weekend, but maybe understandable given he's only just come to the club. He's only just moved to a new country. It's going maybe a hectic week for him. You know, it's going to take him. It was probably a big ask for him to play so well in the European game and then turn it back on against Dundee. But yeah, there's clearly, I think Rangers do have to look at more firepower. We've got a story this morning. They're looking at more defensive options, which I think is something that they're very much looking to do. But yeah, I still think, Cyril Dessers is still, there's a kind of jury out for me on Cyril Dessers and how that's going to develop in the coming weeks. The speculation linking him with a move away from Rangers hasn't gone away. It's obviously the Iggerman situation, which again continues to be there. It hasn't moved on any either. So I do think it certainly wouldn't surprise me if the forward area was something that Russell Martin was looking to do some business in the coming days and weeks.
You expect Rangers to get through. It looks as if it'll be Club Bruges, Robert. They're 1-0 up from an away leg in SunSport. You think Rangers would look to do a bit of business before the Bruges game next midweek?
Yeah, I think they probably would do, but Roger, we know you only have to look across the city. Celtic have got money kind of burning a hole in their pocket and they can't spend it. You know, it's proven very difficult for teams these days to get players, to get things kind of signed and sealed. You know, so the players that Rangers have been looking at on kind of Russell Martin's wish list have been there for a number of weeks now, and they haven't managed to get things over the line. Maybe, as you say, if it looks as though Rangers have a better chance of getting into the Champions League, then you wonder if that maybe just be something that helps push the button on some players and some guys who are maybe considering Rangers as an option. It would be a far more attractive option as a club for Rangers if they are going to be looking to get a chance of European football at the highest level. So, yeah, I think they will be looking to maybe get some things done in the coming days. But as I say, it's proved easier said than done, Roger, for teams. You know, players, when they've got their options, are looking at things that they're considering. Yeah, you know, kind of getting top players to come to Glasgow, certainly not as easy as it maybe once was.
Transfer window closes 3 weeks today. It could be a mad 3 weeks for Rangers. They've got Pilzen. Hopefully for Scottish football, they'll have Bruges in a qualifier. There's an Old Firm game against Celtic to take care of as well before the window shuts, as well as players coming in. Do you see players going out before the window closes? I'm just thinking of a couple in particular. Nico Raskin's been left out the last couple of games. He's a valuable asset. In your story last week, John Souttar's contract talks appear to have stalled.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that's certainly one to keep an eye on, I think. I would be surprised if Souttar was to go this window, in all honesty. But then there has been some interest. There was some Turkish interest. So again, that's maybe one to keep an eye on. Yeah, the Raskin one's fascinating for me. There's arguably Rangers' best player, someone who fans adore. He was a substitute again at the weekend. Rangers fans singing his name. They don't want him sitting on the bench, and you have to imagine that Raskin and the people who kind of look after him aren't happy with this situation and how it's developing. You know, he seems a very kind of level-headed kid. He's a good pro, obviously. I see a boy that's a Belgian international, Roger, who's forced his way into that squad by hook or by crook. You won't want to give that up, and you have to assume that Nico Raskin sitting on the bench for Rangers doesn't get into the Belgian national squad. So you have to imagine that's something at the forefront of his mind. And as you say, it's the way he plays, and because of that profile he's got as an international player, there will be clubs looking at that situation very, very closely in the coming days, coming weeks. And yeah, if Russell Martin isn't too sure about Nico Raskin, you wonder if that's something that he would be open to consider if that was to give him more transfer funds to do business in other areas of the pitch.
I know you're speaking to Russell Martin when Rangers arrive in Pilsen later today. Robert, do you expect Raskin has a chance of starting tomorrow? Does James Tavernier have a chance of starting tomorrow? Will he shuffle the pack again?
Yeah, I actually suspected they both will have a very good chance of starting the match. The Tavernier situation again is another big call for Russell Martin. You know, Max Aarons has come in as one of his signings from Bournemouth. A guy with a vast amount of experience. You know, played a lot of games in the English Premier League. Doesn't look like it. You know, this guy's come in. I know he played left back initially, and that was a problem for him. And it was maybe unfair to judge him on those performances, given he was being played out of position. But I tell you what, I mean, I know that James Tavernier's got his critics. For me, he's a better option than Max Aarons right now. Maybe he's going to need to take a bit of time to settle in, but yeah, I actually find that one a kind of strange one. Russell Martin was maybe making a point after the Motherwell game and how things went. Obviously, Raskin and Tavernier were two of the players that came out of the team. But yeah, I think, as you know, I just wondered about that situation, you know, and how that's going to develop. But yeah, in terms of the team tomorrow night, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if both those players were in the starting lineup.
Robert, that's great. Good luck for the press conference later. Enjoy the game tomorrow. I'm going to let you go. There's a lady over your left shoulder has just entered the picture with what looks a very refreshing pint of Czech lager. Either you're going to go for one or I'm going to have to try and go for one in Glasgow. Thanks very much.
It's certainly not for me, Roger.
Okay, drink responsibly.
So we'll touch back on the Scottish football action from the weekend. Yesterday, the early kick-off, Aberdeen Celtic, bit of revenge for the Hoops for the Scottish Cup final. But again, some rather illuminating comments from Brendan Rodgers, talking about managers being aware of narratives. He seems to know that there's a minority of the Celtic support that don't want him there.
Well, it is a minority. It really is a small minority, I would say. And you'll probably find a minority like that at every club, regardless how well they're doing. Brendan's done a terrific job since he's been back. The cup final that you mentioned against Aberdeen was the kind of hiccup in that record. They've started brightly again. It's back-to-back wins. It's 2 clean sheets as well. And they've got Falkirk, I think, in the cup on Friday night. And then it's the business of the Champions League playoff. The first leg next Wednesday night at Celtic Park. I think Celtic look okay for it. It's interesting for Brendan to say those things yesterday. I'm not quite sure what prompted him to say it, but yeah, there are issues in his team. Nobody's saying there are not issues in his team, but you've seen little flashes in the first couple of games, notably yesterday, Kieran Tierney to Benjamin Nygren for the first goal. Tierney's come back in, Nygren's come back in for the first time, and they look as if they've settled well.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that frustration is actually more maybe to do with the classic board waiting too long to sign players and it's filtered through onto Brendan Rodgers and his team. I mean, you can't get bored of winning, can't you? Can you?
Listen, you can see both sides of the argument. Obviously, football managers, the length and breadth of the country, want more players in. They want signings in. They want signings in early. If you get 5 players signed, managers will say they want 6 or 7. If you get 6 or 7 signed, managers will say they want 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Yes, Celtic need more players. Brendan said last week, even if you just look at the arithmetic, they've lost more players than they've brought in. So the squad size is down. He wants more players. I think he's confident he'll get more players. I'm not sure they'll come in before the first leg next week against either Slovan Bratislava or Karat Almaty, but I think they'll be in before September the 1st.
Aberdeen, on the other hand, tough start to the season with Hearts and Celtic, but again, very early days. We're talking about it being perhaps too early, even for Russell Martin in a more high-stakes job to be put under extreme pressure. But Thelin's been at Pittodrie for 12 months now.
Yeah.
Where do we see Aberdeen at this early stage?
Well, we see them bottom of the league. Where we see now is, listen, there's only 2 games gone, obviously, but there was a killer statistic yesterday. I think my colleague Robert Thompson tweeted that Aberdeen won more games between the 5th of August and 14th of September last year than they've won in this entire calendar year. Their league form in the second half of last season was miserable.
It was dreadful.
They lost their last 4 league games. They've lost their first 2 games in the league this year without scoring a goal, without really looking like scoring a goal. The new signings, they look as if they might take a little bit of time to bed in. You don't get a little bit of time here, Ryan. You know that as well as anyone. They have a Premier Sports Cup game against Morton at Capello on Saturday afternoon. Now, you won't remember this. The great Alec Ferguson used to have real trouble winning at Capello, and it used to annoy the life out of him. And he tried everything. He tried 4-6-0 at Capello before Craig Levine knew 4-6-0 was a thing, and he couldn't win at Capello. Andy Ritchie was a thorn in his side. If Jimmy Thelin doesn't win at Capello, we'll have a story in our hands.
So we're just looking for the spirit of Andy Ritchie at Capello at the weekend then. Moving on to perhaps the game of the weekend just past, Dundee United against Hearts. You know, cracker of a game at Tannadice. Now, for all the score was very close, if you dig down into the stats, Hearts had over 70% possession, played twice as many passes as Dundee United. Something that Aberdeen, who we just touched on, may have a struggle with playing Thursday and then into the weekend. Dundee United maybe take that into account. But Tony Bloom came here and he said, he doubled down on it as well, that he wants to split the Old Firm. And he thinks they can do it this season. What do you think?
I don't think they can do it this season. I don't think Rangers will win the league because the gap's too big to Celtic, and I don't think Hearts will split the Old Firm because the gap's too big to Rangers. Hearts were 7th last season. They're in the bottom 6, remember. That's why they've got a new manager in Derek McInnes. I think Tony Bloom's money and Derek McInnes' acumen will improve them markedly. I've already tipped them to finish 3rd this season. I just think if Aberdeen already guaranteed group stage football, that Thursday-Sunday thing will harm them. Hibs look well set for group stage football. The Thursday-Sunday thing will harm them. Just look at yesterday, 2-0 up against Kilmarnock, and they ran out of steam, 2-2, and they could have lost the game. So Hearts, for me, well set to be 3rd, no higher.
So with that, You're going to go and speak to Kris Boyd to recap, again, as we've just said, a real bumper weekend in Scottish football. Stay tuned for Celtic and Rangers transfer specials this week, and of course we'll be back with Go Ballistic next week too. In the meantime, scottishsun.co.uk/sport for all the latest.
Well, we can head down to Ayrshire now to SunSport's Kris Boyd. Boydy, I think it's important to say for any viewers who think this is just a repeat of last week or any week last season, simply because Celtic have won and Rangers have dropped points. It's not a repeat. It is Monday, August the 11th. Celtic won at Aberdeen. Rangers dropped points at Dundee. There is a bit of deja vu about all of this. You were at Pittodrie yesterday. Bit of a stroll for Celtic?
Yeah, it sure was. I felt as if I never got out of second gear, Roger. Aberdeen came out and they were probably first 5-10 minutes, they had a little go, didn't they? Kind of tried to get after Celtic, looked to try and hit in the counter-attack, but, I can't really see a direction of where Aberdeen are going right now. Are they a team that counter-attack? If they are that, then, I'm afraid they need to get better players in the forward areas. If they're going to sit off, then whenever a team gets to within, an area of your goal, then you have to press them. And I don't see that either. So, for Aberdeen right now, I said it yesterday, I'll say it again. I get the feeling that, winning that Scottish Cup, albeit fantastic day for the football club, for Jimmy Thelin, the players, the city of Aberdeen. But for me, it's paper over the cracks.
3 points for Celtic yesterday. You'd say it's the same old Celtic, but there were changes. Brendan Rodgers didn't have a tie on Boydy, and then he was saying afterwards, there are people that, regardless what he does, there are people around Celtic who will never like him. Were there strange comments? Did they surprise you?
Well, I think he's telling the truth. I mean, I don't think that when you listen to Brendan Rodgers, I think he's very calculated in everything he says. You go back a couple of weeks ago and he came out asking for players, and he has kind of changed his tune over the last few days, but or the last week anyway. But you look at when Brendan Rodgers arrived back in Scottish football, there was a lot of Celtic fans weren't wanting him anywhere near the football club again. But, I'll say it again. Brendan Rodgers is an elite manager. He has shown that over a period of time. He had full backing and his ability to come into Celtic and continue what he'd left off. And that's exactly what he's done. To replace Ange Postecoglou, it wasn't going to be, easy. But for Brendan Rodgers, as I said, he had full confidence in his ability to go in and do that. And that's exactly what he's done. He'll do it his way. He'll do it his style. A lot of managers would have come in and just continued to keep going with the Ange Postecoglou style. He's changed it again, tweaked things here and there because the way he works. But I know the whole thing regarding the transfers right now. I can understand both sides of it. I wouldn't be sitting here taking Brendan Rodgers' sides. I wouldn't be sitting here taking the football club side because he has spent a fortune. You only need to go back to yesterday as well. Arnie Engels on the bench, Trusty on the bench. And Adam Ida, he is struggling. There is no getting away from it. He's whether the team's playing to his strengths, I don't know, but he doesn't look as if last season obviously got goals and he had an impact in the team. But the first two games of this season, I've yet to see that. Listen, it might take him a few weeks to get up to speed, but I would imagine Brendan Rodgers is looking to strengthen in that area or in the wide areas to allow him to put Maeda through the middle. Those were the three main signings last year. But on the flip side of that, Brendan Rodgers will say, well, we brought Nicholas Kuhn in. We're able to, for a couple of £1 million, able to sell him on for huge amounts of money. Nygren, you could probably look at and say there's a potential there already. We've seen it for a couple of £1 million for a big transfer. So there is no doubt he makes players better. But from a Celtic board's point of view, they'll be saying, well, the ones who you've spent the big money on have failed to deliver so far for the club.
What do you do with Adam Ida, Boydy? They've got Falkirk in the Premier Sports Cup on Friday night. Do you try and keep Ida in the team and hope he gets a goal and comes out of this sort of slump? Or do you have to look at changing something? Does Maeda go back through the middle? Do you have a starter, Shinya Maeda, who came on yesterday?
Well, I think when you've been given the role as a number 9, especially at Celtic or any big football club, you've got to be scoring goals. And if you're not, then your position will be under threat. So as you say, there's other ones there now, and young Kenny will be looking at it as well.
can I get an opportunity in this cup game to show what I can do? But Brendan will be probably looking at it saying, if I go and put one of them in, then that stakes a claim for them, and it probably weakens his opportunity of getting somebody else in. So, I mean, he might stick with Adam Ida, I don't know. If he does, you kind of get the feeling that Ida needs to start scoring goals, because I look at him and I think his all-round game is, I don't see it bad. I mean, I think he can link the play. He's a big boy. He'll go and win his headers. He'll do. But I think because he's not scoring right now and people are, starting to question him, that's having an impact in his, the other attributes of his game. So he could be doing with a goal. He could be doing with a decent performance. And as I said, getting his name in that score sheet. And we've seen it before, especially with old firm strikers. If they get one, you could quite easily go and have another 4 or 5 before the end of the month.
Speaking of old firm strikers, Cyril Dessers thought he'd won it for Rangers somehow on Saturday evening against Dundee. He was offside. The goal was disallowed after a VAR check. Rangers didn't get out of jail against Dundee. 2 games, 2 draws. First time Rangers have failed to win either of their first 2 league games since 1989, Boydy. What is going wrong domestically for Russell Martin?
It's hard to exactly pinpoint what it is, Roger, because you look at the performances from Europe. I'm not saying the Panathinaikos, the 2 games there were outstanding performance, but there was signs there that you could see, right, okay, Rangers were trying to do something. Got through the tie, what was the most important thing. Then you look at the performance against Pilzen on Tuesday night. Look, they were absolutely rubbish. There's no getting away from it. I mean, they were as bad a European team as I have seen arrive in Scottish football. But the worry for me with Russell Martin would be that the performance levels at Motherwell, the performance levels against Dundee are similar. There's similarities there for what we've seen in the past for Rangers. And, you can't just switch it on and off whenever you want. You need to turn up every single, game. And, I know when you come off the back of Europe, get the game finished as quickly as you possibly can. Try and win it in that first half. Then you can make substitutions. Then, for Rangers right now, it seems to be, everything, maybe that extra pass, maybe the atmosphere at Ibrox on Saturday. I mean, I went there as well. I mean, it was, you could tell that the fans were on edge. They want success. They want the team to do well. When it doesn't happen, they're frustrated. They've seen this movie before. And I can understand, I totally get where they're coming from, because it has to be better on the pitch. It has to be. I touched on trying to pierce the middle, everything through the middle, to maybe then try and take an angle to get it wide. But by the time that happens, it's maybe 1 or 2 extra passes. By the time it gets to the wide men, Dundee at the weekend especially, were set in their back 5 as such. The balls were, rather than being fizzed across the front for a striker or midfielders to try and get on the end of, they were kind of floated into the box. I mean, Dundee's got big guys 6 foot plus. They're just going to head it away. So I think there needs to be more of a variety in the way that Rangers attack, quicker. And I'll say it again, Roger. I touched on it yesterday. I might be wrong. I might be wrong here. And come the end of the season, I'll hold my hands up if I am. But I don't see. I mean, obviously with Kasama and Ant-Man, they're the ones that's been playing. You have to say you can only put Václav Černý up against one of them. So whatever one you want to put him up against, then the other one's still in the debate. But the rest, I don't see any better than what was already there. Do you? Like, am I missing
no, listen, the point I was going to make, the controversy in the last week is the manager's left out James Tavernier and Nicholas Raskin, and he's moved Max Aarons to right back, and he's persisted with Joe Rothwell in that number 6 role. I tend to agree. So far, I haven't seen Aarons show that he's any better than Tavernier, and I haven't seen Rothwell show that he's any better in that 6 role than Raskin.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's more disciplined. He's in terms of sitting in front of that back line, and then he'll start to move things for it, and everything looks to go through him. Whether it's into there for a little triangle pass to then get it out the other side, whether he's moving it from side to side, everything goes through. He's probably more disciplined in that 6 than what Nico Raskin was. But there's not enough for me to turn around and say, Nico Raskin, he's better than Raskin right now. You go defensively. I don't think Aaron's it's going to be very difficult for whoever comes in to replace James Tavernier, because people can say, he's not won a lot of things. But in terms of what he's given Rangers, and we speak about it often, goals, assists, his performance levels, the amount of games he's played as well, that's very difficult to replace. And whoever comes in is going to be judged against that going forward. And it's not easy to replace him. Hence the reason why he's been there for a period of time. There's been players come in the past to try and replace him, and it hasn't worked. And Max Aarons, I know he was playing out of position the start of the season. He's a total different player. And what James Tavernier has given Rangers over a period of time, they might not see it again. They might have a better defender. They might, they have to adapt the way they play. But I don't see Max Aarons as being an upgrade than James Tavernier right now. De Jager obviously gets sent off at the weekend, and he looks a decent, strong enough defender. But is he? We were saying the exact same about Leon Balogun last year as well. He would throw himself in front of things. With a decent passer. He was athletic. He would get around. Okay, maybe at a different age bracket. He picked up a few injuries, but I don't really look at him and think, you're a massive upgrade than what Leon Balogun was. Listen, I think the big one for Rangers would be Asgard. Everybody says that he's the one that will make the difference. So Russell Martin will be hoping to get him back. And for Rangers' point of view, you hope that is the case, because they need somebody in and around that 10 position to get on the ball and unlock defences, because they say it's pass to the wide areas. And sometimes when it goes into those, you see it with Celtic, with Hatate and Nygren. They're further up the pitch, and they've got on the half turn, and they'll slip little balls through, they'll get shots away themselves. Both of them scored yesterday. Rangers midfielders, like, in that area, they don't even really have shots to go.
They won't be involved in Pilzen tomorrow night, but you wonder if Asgard, Mikey Moore, Hamza Egerman could all be involved against Alloa on Saturday night, maybe, and show Russell Martin what they can bring in the final third. Yeah, well,
Russell's probably, I know he would have knew it was a huge job, and from the performance levels on Tuesday to Wednesday, the drop off would be concerning. You look at, you can't go back a few weeks ago, Roger, and say that Rangers couldn't have handpicked a better start to the season. Listen, it looks as if I don't know if I've called it wrong, but Dundee and Motherwell were my bottom two. And Rangers have failed to beat either of them. Dundee have,
they start. It'll be a long season for Rangers then, Boydy.
Dundee have started the season so poorly, but they could have won it at Ibrox at the weekend. They had a threat, and then Rangers started to play better with 10 men and have a go, and then ask questions in, which there was an intensity in the play, and it was the exact same the week before as well, Roger. When Motherwell equalised, then Rangers had a couple of opportunities just after that. When you felt it was Bajrami down the right hand side at Fir Park, there was an intensity back in their play. That needs to be there from the start. That needs to be there to teams, to run over the top of teams, get the game won. Then you can start to make changes. And you feel as if Rangers are just, passing it for the sake of passing it a lot of the times. Russell Martin will say that that's the way that he wants to play, and that's the style, and it will eventually come good. And Rangers fans will be hoping that is the case. But going back to Russell, in terms of the scrutiny that he's under after every single match, it's just going to intensify until Rangers start winning trophies again. And he will know that that's what he signed up for. He's been there as a player, how difficult it is. But, Roger, Rangers could be, 7 points behind Celtic now going into that Old Firm game. To lose that 10 points behind Celtic at the end of August, I don't see Rangers being able to claw that back.
No.
And I think that would be, that would be the scary thing about it. Decided to cancel the game against St Mirren next week. Would have been a difficult game anyway, in 2 weeks' time. But you're already going into that Celtic game under massive pressure now. Massive.
Yeah. And potentially without Nasser Jiga after his red card at the weekend.
Well, he's suspended now, isn't he? Because misses the next game misses the next game in that competition. So obviously, he'll play the League Cup game, and then he misses it would have been St Mirren, but because it's been cancelled, it's going to be Celtic now. So there's another headache that Russell Martin didn't need. And as I said, there's a lot of negativity growing. You could have felt as if even the fans with the substitutions at the weekend as well, they weren't happy. But I think that I get the fact that Rangers fans and, you know, football fans, when their team's not doing well, they want to voice their frustration. But, you know, booing players onto the park and that's not for me.
Yeah. Not so much headaches, more hangovers for the other Euro participants, Hibs and Dundee United. Hibs coming back from Belgrade, 2 up against Kelly, pulled back to 2-2. They almost lost it in the end. United coming back from Vienna, 2-1 up against Hearts, and they did lose it in the end. Stuart Finley's second goal deep into added time. Does that just show, Boydy, how difficult it is to do the Thursday, Sunday thing?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's no. I mean, don't get me wrong. Especially for Dundee United, I mean, coming up against a Hearts team that, you know, I don't think they were unbelievable against Aberdeen, but they were good enough for the 3 points against Aberdeen. And you know the way that Derek McInnes sets his teams up is going to be a battle. You know, Jim Goodwin, I think, deserves enormous credit again, because you look and say, you thought to yourself, because the players had lost, the drop-off would have been. But Jim seems to thrive, Roger, in building teams up again, building squads. And you can tell that there's a few good players that have already arrived at Dundee United. You know, and you know, they got themselves in a good position. But, you know, similar to, you know, we've seen it with Derek McInnes' teams in the past, when you start to get a bit of momentum. You know, Hearts fans will point back to, you know, the George Burley era, Jim Jeffries to start, when they got off to a fantastic start and asking questions of team. To go to Tannadice at any time and get, it doesn't matter if they're off the back of, you know, European football, get the 3 points, find a way to win, score in 90 odd minutes, then, you know, they'll be absolutely buzzing. Tough game for Hearts next week, going to St Mirren in the Cup, probably one of the toughest they could have got. But nobody will want to face Hearts right now. You know, that, I mean, what was it, 2,800 odd fans through it, and Dundee as well. So they're starting to build a little bit of momentum. And, you know, defensively, they seem sound enough. You know, in terms of the back three they've got, yeah, they're going to concede goals because they're more in the kind of front foot as well. But when you've got a centre back scoring goals, then it's a good attribute to have. 2 unbelievable headers as well. Don't get me wrong. You know, with the size of Stuart Finley's head, obviously I played with him. It was you know, it was just a matter of making contact with the ball, and they were going to fly in the back of the net.
Before we go, Boydy, fashion, you seem to be
sorry, Roy, I must a special. I mean, I know Rio Hatate scored an unbelievable goal at Pittodrie, but young Ben Brannan's goal for Kilmarnock yesterday was a thing of beauty. That was incredible.
A goal. Lewis Smith for Livy.
Lewis Smith's a great strike as well.
A weekend of great goals, Boydy.
You know, to watch that coming out of the sky for the amount of time he did, and then hit it the way, oh, what a strike that was. What a goal.
You'd done that to Easter Road, the ball would be in Leith Walk. I was
going
going
to ask silly. The back of the net through there, that's for sure.
You've come back from Pittodrie with Jimmy Tillin's t-shirt on. We've got Russell Martin in a t-shirt. We've got Derek McInnes in a t-shirt, Boydy. Is Brendan just breaking in the Celtic fans with no tie yesterday?
Well, we've seen him last year. We've seen him last year. The jumper. We've seen him last year. He had the jumper on, didn't he, for a few weeks. Listen, I mean, I think it's part of culture, isn't it, Roger? It's changing. You know, it's changing. The old collar and tie.
Down your way, it appears to be.
Past, it's fashionable now. It'll catch on with yourself one day.
Dear. I'm not so sure about that. Anyway, Boydy, listen, I know you've got a big day. You're hitting some of the golf courses of Ayrshire today. You go and enjoy yourself. Just proof it's not just Robert Grieve that gets days off to play golf in here.
The residents of Troon, be aware.
All the best.
Cheers, thank you.